We're back on the IlliniGuys Sports Spectacular, and we're going to talk about this big game on Saturday night. We've got the resident expert from IlliniGuys.com, Matt Stevens, here to talk to us about what appears to be one of the most important games of the Brett Bielema tenure here at Illinois when he hosts the Kansas Jayhawks, the ranked Kansas Jayhawks, in a sellout stadium. Memorial Stadium sold out. This is big time, Matt.
No doubt about it, Brad. I think the biggest game that Brett Bielema has ever coached in his tenure at Illinois. I think it's an opportunity for Illinois to kickstart the momentum of its 2024 season. I think it's the opportunity for Illinois to beat a ranked team in Memorial Stadium. I know it's the opportunity for Illinois to be its first ranked team in Memorial Stadium, non-conference team since 2011. And honestly, we know this because we see and read about it every day on our message boards. Last year's game in Lawrence is still talked about. And I think this is an opportunity for everybody involved in the Illini football program to wipe away the memory of what happened last year. Start 2-0. And if you start 2-0 with a win against number 19, you get a chance to start feeling about, you start asking questions about what bowl game Illinois is going to go to instead of if Illinois is going to go to a bowl game, and what kind of special season could be happening instead of if it's going to be a special season. And I just feel like I felt this way for months when the schedule came out, that this was going to be a tipping point to 2024. And I think you've got a confident group in the Smith Center that's getting ready for Saturday night.
Matt, you look at this Kansas team coming in, Jalen Daniels gets all the headlines, but isn't it the running game that makes this team roll? And isn't that the trademark of Lance Leipold?
Yeah, I do, Mike, and I think that both of these two teams are eerily similar in how they see football, and they're eerily similar in how they want to play offensively in a philosophical sense. Kansas has a three-headed monster at tailback, and it's not just Devin Neal who's their best player, but they have two other guys behind him that on any given day could go for 100 and a couple of scores. They really feel that way. Caden Fagan gets a lot of, highlight time and has his first 100-yard game in his college career, but he didn't start that game on Thursday night. Aiden Lawfrey started that game on Thursday night, and Josh McCray is already going for 100 in his freshman year. So they feel like, in the Smith Center, they have three backs that they can hand the football to and have a big night. And so, yeah, Lance won six Division III national championships at UW-Whitewater, running the football and playing really, really solid fundamental defense. I think the only difference between these two teams, Mike, is that you mentioned Jalen Daniels. There is an element to Jalen Daniels being part of the run game at Kansas because of what he can do with his feet. And, I say that, and I think that in the Smith Center, they feel like they've got a pretty athletic quarterback in Luke Altmaier, too. Now, I don't think he's as dynamic with his feet as Jalen Daniels, but there are a lot of things that Kansas's offensive coordinator, Jeff Grimes, can do with Jalen Daniels with the football. And it's a true run-pass option, triple threat kind of with him. And I do feel like Illinois has got to be prepared for that.
Matt, the Illini really struggled to slow down Kansas last year in Lawrence. It was the second sack of Lawrence. Oh, but no, different one. But they had but they were on the struggle bus defensively. But this defense looks different, and I guess Kansas doesn't have the same defense either. They lost a lot of their front seven. Illinois doesn't have Johnny Newton, obviously, or Keith Randolph, etc. But this defense looks like it might be a little bit more experienced at other positions, and talented, which may allow them to maybe make up some difference and not be such a sieve this time.
Yeah, Brad, I think that there's also more of a sense of what Aaron Henry wants to do. I really believe that Lance Leipold took advantage of a very, very young and inexperienced defensive play caller. And you mix that in with the aggressiveness that Aaron Henry likes to play defensively, especially in the back. And it was a problem because there was so much inexperience in the back that if they weren't going to be able to get to the quarterback, they were going to have problems. I said that all year last year. Well, they didn't get to the quarterback last year. And not only that, they didn't get to the quarterback, but when they missed him, he created lanes for him to be able to take advantage, whether that's in the run game or setting up to, do backyard football passes like they did. There was an element to, what you're pointing out, Brad, is I also think the rush ends, a Seth Coleman, a Gabe Yakus, and Alec Bryant, they remember what happened in Lawrence. They remember how unorganized and slow they looked in that football game. And I think they've gotten a year better. And I think they've gotten a year smarter. And I think they understand. They've watched enough film of that game to know what they did wrong, and they can just translate it to something that I feel like will be beneficial to them in Champaign. But you've also got to realize, Brad, that offensive coordinator that made Aaron Henry look foolish last year, he's now in Happy Valley. And Jeff Grimes has to figure out a way to do this with a lot of the same pieces, but they're different offensively with Jeff Grimes than they were with Andy Kolecki. And I think that's going to be a different element to Saturday night as well.
As a guy who's covered the SEC, you covered the Big Ten, what matchups are you looking at on the field that you think are going to really determine how this game goes?
In a sense, I want to see, again, like I said, the edge rushers at Illinois. Not only are they going to be out, I don't judge it by sacks. Like one of them, like we've talked a little bit about this in the off season. They have a Havoc belt, championship belt on the Illinois defense. It looks like a WWE championship belt. I feel like one of the rush ends, whether it's Gabe Yakus or Seth Coleman or Alec Bryant or Daniel Brown, if he plays, who's from Kansas, they have to win that belt. They have to live in the backfield. And when they're not living in the backfield, they have to set the edge on the run game. Devin Neal and Jalen Daniels cannot turn the corner. They turn the corner way too often in Lawrence. So I feel like that's a matchup I'm interested in. On the other side, I'm really, really interested to see if look, guys, I think this game's going to be one in the trenches. And I'm interested to see if Illinois' offensive line, a revamped offensive line, especially at tackle, which what you saw last year in Kansas, can hold the fort, not only for what Luke Altmaier wants to do in the pass game, but Illinois wants to mix up what they do in the run game, not only from guard to guard, but I think that you saw even a little bit on Thursday night against EIU. They want to get out on the perimeter when they do run plays, and I think they're really, really good at it, and they're really athletic in the offensive line. If they can figure out how to do that, I think Illinois will put up enough points for it to matter. I just think defensively they've got to figure out a way to bottle up Jalen Daniels, because if they don't, he could have another big day just like he did last year.
In talking to people around, I guess, the Kansas program, I think the one concern about Daniels is doing it in a road environment. This looks like it's going to be a pretty raucous environment. It's a Saturday night. It's a sold out crowd. You're going to have, and I will say the EIU game had a packed student section. So you put that together and it's going to be a lot of, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of day drinking going on before they get out there. This crowd's going to be nuts. And is that going to make a difference in this game?
Brad, in the SEC, we call that properly lubricated. I do think the fans and the crowd will be properly lubricated before the 6 p.m. local kick. I do think it's going to be a raucous environment. It's one of the reasons why I think this is a huge game for the Bielema era and the biggest game of the Bielema era. I think he could deposit a lot of checks, figuratively and literally, if he wins this football game and he's already shown proof of concept. But I think this fan base needs a reminder of what special things could happen in the Bielema era because of the preparation that's going on in the Smith Center. Proof of concept was shown in Happy Valley in 2021. It was shown at Minnesota in 2021. It was shown last year, at Wisconsin when he a day later got his buddy Paul Christ fired. Like, all of those things happened because Brett Bielema transformed Illinois football. But after what happened in 2023, I feel like this fan base needs a reminder of really great things that can happen. This is, I think, the best opportunity, especially at home, that Illinois had under Bielema, to remind a fan base that we've moved on from the basement of the Big Ten days and can move into a phase in which Illinois can do some really special things. I think emotionally, that's what the fan base is looking for. I do think that the crowd could play a factor, because even Lance Leipold this week kind of mentioned, look, we're still in the rebuilding phase of this thing that we're doing here at Kansas, and we haven't gone into a raucous environment in a power conference in a long, long time. I think it was probably his first year when they went into Texas and won, and then nobody thought Kansas could do that. but it's been about 3 years since Lance has done that. And I think that they need to prove that they can go away from home and pull off another win like this. So both sidelines and both guys roaming those sidelines have something to prove on Saturday night.
So we know what the nightmare scenario looks like for Illinois because we had to watch that last year. What is the perfect scenario if Brett Bielema and Aaron Henry are drawing up the game plan? If it goes perfectly, what will that look like?
I think it's, I'll give you a number. I think if Illinois can hit 200 yards on the ground, I think they have a really, really good shot at winning the football game. And the reason I feel that way is because I think Lance Leipold's defense and the guys that he's brought from Whitewater to Buffalo to now to Kansas, they don't let teams just run over them physically. They don't let teams outman them at the line of scrimmage. If that happens on Saturday, I think Illinois can not only A, put up enough points, but B, control the tempo to the point in which I think that they have a really good shot of winning this game. They don't have to win time of possession, but it's kind of like a boxing match, Cagley. It's like if Illinois can figure out a way to run and run it right down the throat of Kansas, those are like body blows in boxing. And eventually, I think in the fourth quarter, you're going to see that, the C part, and you're going to see some big plays in the run game. If that can happen, I do think Illinois has an advantage. And I think on defense, if you start to see any kind of confusion in the Kansas backfield, whether that's, hey, we can't get the play in because the crowd's too loud, or, I don't know where the rush is coming. If Jaylen Daniels has his head on a swivel pre-snap and is trying to point at guys constantly, I think you could start to see Illinois' defense start to build more and more confidence. Let me also remind everybody, I've slowly but surely become part of the Matthew Bailey. I've jumped on the Matthew Bailey bandwagon here. He did not play in Lawrence last year. And I think he provides a major motivational lift, a major talent lift, and a major confidence boost for this secondary, knowing that Matthew Bailey's back there, knowing that number 7's back there, and we have another experienced guy that we can rely on, not only to stop the passing game, but he is an excellent run filler at the line of scrimmage as well. Like I would say a poor man's version of what Sidney Brown was in 2022.
Well, the Illini are going to need everything to go their way. I mean, I think they're going to need a big game from the defensive side. They're going to be able to run the football. I think there's a lot of things, and we're going to find out Saturday night. Quickly, Matt, we got just a few seconds. What's your prediction?
I think the line is pretty true. I think Illinois can win the football game, Brad. I think people should expect Illinois to win this football game. I think they can win this football game. And if they do win this football game, I think 2024 could be pretty special, with Illinois having some suddenly now pretty winnable games in the next few weeks and before we hit Halloween.
There you have it. Big game Saturday night, 6 p.m. Memorial Stadium, sold out crowd. Kansas, number 19, Kansas coming to town to take on the Fighting Illini.
Red Grange wasn't just a football player, he was a legend. Discover the untold story of Illini great Red Grange in a new novel by Doug Vilhard called The Golden Age of Red. This captivating book takes you back to the 1920s when a humble young Illinois player transformed into the galloping ghost and electrified the nation. Get your copy of The Golden Age of Red by Doug Vilhard today. Available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Welcome back to the show, folks. This is Mike Kegley here with Brad Sturdy, Larry Smith. We are talking probably a game that when I saw on the schedule, I was very scared because I had the, quote, pleasure, and I'm making air quotes, of going to Lawrence, Kansas and watching Kansas fillet the Illini last year. And we've got on Andy Mitz, who is the publisher of All Jayhawks and the Athlon Network. And I'm going to tell you right now, Andy, give me a reason why you think this game is going to be closer than it was last season, because Illini fans need to hear something.
I will say that I do think, based off of what I saw in week 1, that Illinois' offense looks to be a lot better than it was last year, or at least a lot more cohesive than it was last year. And while I do think the Kansas defense has probably improved overall, they definitely still had some hiccups against Lindenwood. So plus it's on the road for the Jayhawks. So I don't think it's going to be quite as comfortable for them as it was when they were at home and could feed off of the huge crowd.
So, I guess I look at this. I mean, this is a game. It's so important for Illinois. This Kansas game. How is it as important for Kansas to really get this win? I mean, obviously they have high expectations, and maybe it's important for a different reason. But does Kansas look at this as a must-win game for them?
I think so. This is a Kansas team that has talked openly, right, about what their expectations are for the year of being in Arlington, having a chance to win a Big 12 championship and making the college football playoff. And if they don't win in Arlington, then they're going to need to make sure that the rest of their resume is spotless in order to get in as an at-large. Not to mention, this is the last ride for a huge portion of this team, and they feel like they've fell short of their own internal expectations each of the last 2 years. Even though they've gone to bowl games and they won a bowl game last year for the first time in a really long time, this is a team that feels like they should have been able to do more. And so I think this is a game that they are super hyped up for. It's also probably one of the bigger tests for this offense, because the Illinois defense, regardless of how much of a step back it took last year, it's still probably one of the better defenses they faced last year. And so the fact they were able to kind of put up that performance, starting, they don't want to take a huge step back. And this offense already had enough people kind of wondering, oh, is Jalen Daniels going to stay healthy all year? Can this team do what they need to do if Jalen Daniels is not the quarterback? Like, there's already tons of questions about this offense because of that injury history. They want to go out and put on a good show and make sure that people take them seriously as hey, we're not just the Jalen Daniels show. We are the Kansas offense who happens to be led by a great quarterback in Jalen Daniels.
Yeah, their running backs are pretty fearsome. You give us Illini fans a preview as to what they're going to run into, because Neal is quite the running back.
Yeah, so Devin Neal is a kind of guy that I think could put up production somewhat similar to a guy like Taj Brooks at Texas Tech or Ollie Gordon, at Oklahoma State, if he actually was going to have the same sort of workload. The main issue that he's had, and the reason he has not put up some of those stats that you see from some of the best running backs in the nation, is because he has another guy in Daniel Highshaw who is a really good backup who does different things, but does them at a very high level as well. Devin Neal doesn't need to run the ball, 25, 30 times a game. He runs it, 11 to 15. And in doing that allows him to be fresher. So you get to the end of games, he can put up those big plays, but he's also a guy that's shifty enough. I mean, he routinely has, 40 to 50 yard runs in games. I think last year he had a total of 8 of them over the course of the season, like of 45 plus runs. And so this is a guy that has a super explosive and is able to shift at the line and find those holes. And I think that this Kansas offensive line has gotten better and better year after year, which has opened up even more holes for him. So Devin Neal will be the first to tell you that his offensive line does great things for him, and the wide receivers blocking on the outside make a lot of things possible for him. But he is also a guy that just has so much great talent that, if running backs, I think were taken a little bit more seriously in the NFL draft, he would have a good opportunity to being the first round draft pick, or maybe, or top a second round draft pick for the Jayhawks. But unfortunately, he's at the running back position, so I don't know that that's necessarily in the cards for him. But yeah, he easily could be one of the best running backs in all of the country this year. The question is just going to be, is he going to get enough carries that people are actually going to see it?
How is the offense going to change with Andy Kotelnicki going to Penn State and at least early on making Drew Aller look like a really good quarterback?
Yeah, so Kotelnicki was absolutely great for this team. And I do agree that, like, it's a big loss, but they brought in Jeff Grimes, offensive coordinator, was at BYU when BYU got their offense turned around, then was at Baylor, and unfortunately had some issues there that weren't necessarily him related. I think it was more kind of the cohesiveness of the staff related. Grimes has very similar ideas, I think, and overall about how, like, the general direction, but he definitely seems to be much more open and willing to using wide receivers as wide receivers catching passes, as opposed to mainly focusing on them run blocking. That's what we saw a lot with Kotelnicki, and it drove a lot of Kansas fans crazy, is that, we have wide receivers who are very, very good and do what they do, but Kansas almost solely relied on the run, except for the occasional deep shot down the field, or when Jalen Daniels was scrambling, there was a lot more plays where he had to make a passing play as opposed to them looking for a passing play. they've done a lot better at it this year, and they did it really well in the bowl game. Jeff Grimes wasn't the actual signal caller there, but he had a heavy influence at that point because he was already with the team. This is a team that has a really good wide receiver core. And they have, I would argue that they've been underutilized the last few years. And I think some of that is Jalen Daniels' injury and rotating quarterbacks and like trying to deal with all of the injury issues. But Luke Grimm, you saw what he could do in week 1 with the kind of catches that he had. You have Lawrence Arnold and Quentin Skinner, who are both guys that have that same sort of talent level. I don't think any of them are going to be like all Big 12, wide receiver, like first team or anything like that, just because of how much the ball is going to be shared around by the Kansas offense. But I think that Grimes utilizes the pieces in a completely different way from what Kotelnicki does that isn't going to necessarily be less successful. It's just going to be different.
So obviously the Kansas offense is very, very strong, but Illinois feels like their offense is good as well. And now, is there question marks about the Kansas defense? There's something Illinois can exploit on the Kansas defense?
So the thing with the Kansas defense, and I think where a lot of fans were worried, and honestly, I was a little concerned coming into the year as well, is just how much they lost in the front seven. They lost Rich Miller, their quarterback of the defense. They lost Austin Booker. They lost a lot of their pass rushing guys. But what's different this year than any year prior is, one, they had a couple guys step up. Kenny Logan, the senior safety from last year, is gone. But OJ Burrows just kind of stepped in, and he was making strides at the end of last year to really kind of take over and be one of the main guys. You see the same thing from Cornell Wheeler kind of stepping in for Rich Miller, who graduated from the linebacking position. He's that quarterback of the defense for them. Then you've had a lot of guys that have kind of stepped up and developed along that defensive line. Dean Miller did a really great job getting a 4th down sack against Lindenwood. But they've also got a bigger talent base, even if it's guys that haven't necessarily been here. And I think that's the big difference this year, is that they have a lot of depth guys from the last few years that are now there to kind of help, but they also brought in a lot of very talented freshmen and transfers that you just haven't seen in the last few years. So I think if there's anything, it's inexperience. There's guys that just have not had the experience at this level. And if Illinois can, give them some good looks and can use some good misdirection, I think that we saw them get beat a few times to the outside on a reverse or, kind of misdirection, causing them to over pursue the wrong way at the start. I'll be interested to see how much Illinois can actually do that and how they can actually go ahead and get Kansas kind of moving the wrong way so that they can't recover in time.
How is the kicking game going? Particular, we've heard there's some challenges, or there was a competition for the place kicking. How is that looking?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was a little surprised that Tabor Allen, who has been the kickoff specialist for the Jayhawks the last few years, that he was the place kicker. And I think that says as much about them not being super confident in who the guy is, as opposed to him, just blowing everybody away. It hasn't been bad, but he did miss an extra point. It, hit off the uprights. They haven't really needed him to do much. And that's kind of the way that Kansas's kicking game has been for the most part, is that if the kicking game is what you need to lean on to win the game, that means that enough things are going wrong in the rest of the offense that you're in that situation. And it probably is not going to make the difference. So it's unfortunate, but I don't think that kicking has kind of been a focus. If it does come down to kicking, I would say that Illinois probably, without knowing a thing about Illinois' kicking game, they probably have the advantage there.
So as you kind of break down this game, I see, from our perspective, we see two teams that maybe have questions on defense, although they may have more talent and depth. But I definitely feel like this could be a game that's high scoring. Do you see that happening, where it's going to be like one of those games that can be up and down, a little bit of a track meet?
Yeah, I would not be shocked by any kind of final score here, right? Like if Illinois' defense is as good as it's advertised to be, and they've taken that step forward, I see that they could slow the Jayhawks down. And then if their offense is as good as, as improved, then it's possible that we could see Illinois win this one big. The opposite direction, though, like if Kansas is clicking on all cylinders, no matter how good the Illinois defense has gotten or is, Kansas has the ability to go up against some of the best defenses and just completely light them up regardless. So, I really could kind of see it going the other way as well. I would not be shocked though if this is like a, I think my personal thoughts on this one is probably gonna be like a 42-38. Like it's gonna be a very high scoring game because I do think that Kansas, while their defense is good or a lot better than it has been, it's still early in the season. They're still trying to figure things out. They're still kind of working out those kinks. And hey, guess what? They're on the road, which is not something that this group as a defense has been able to really simulate.
Is that the best hope for the Illini, is that this Kansas team has not had a lot of success on the road?
I mean, yeah, I think it's weird because specifically Jaylen Daniels has not necessarily had the success on the road that you would hope for. Although you look at what he's done, like he has an overtime win against West Virginia. He's got some decent road game wins. The problem that you have is, yeah, this is a team I think overall that just doesn't have a ton of experience on the road in its current configuration. But I think it's really just the lack of experience with this defense all working together with all the guys they brought in and kind of the way. Now it helps that they have a back line of that defense that have been playing together for a really long time. You saw Mello Dotson get that pick 6 against Lindenwood, and then you have OJ Burrows, who's been terrorizing people in the back for a good year now. And then you have over on the other side, Kobe Bryant, who is probably the most talented guy, but nobody throws to him anymore. So, you get to the point where if you make it difficult to go deep, that really helps simplify the game for the front seven because they know that they have to be the ones to kind of stop it. So I do think, though, that probably is the best bet, is that Illinois' offense has to get going. This is not going to be like a 12-10 game or a really low scoring game. Kansas is going to score in the mid-20s at the lowest. So Illinois is going to have to keep up, which means that you have to hope that your that your offense can get going and really kind of put some pressure on that Kansas defense and get them on their back foot.
They're not trying to join the Big Ten West. If they don't want that 12-10 game, huh?
No, definitely not. We'll leave those kind of games to Iowa State and Iowa.
That's much better. Let them have to watch that with their eyes bleeding.
Oh, man.
Hey, Andy, thanks for coming on the show. Anybody who's going to take a crack at Iowa is a friend of ours. So we think that's great. And folks, and anybody listening, if you liked Andy's stuff, go to All Jayhawks. And he also does the Rock Chalk Pod. And so you definitely want to pay attention to what he's got out there if you're a Jayhawk fan. And we'll be right back after these messages.